The lie started small, the way most lies do. A misunderstanding that nobody bothered to correct because the truth was more complicated than anyone wanted to deal with. I'm Marcus, I'm 28 now, and for the last 6 years, my mother has been telling everyone I'm a college dropout. Not because it's true, but because she never asked what actually happened, and I stopped trying to explain. It started my sophomore year. I was at a state university, in the pre-med track, living in the dorms, and doing everything the traditional way. My parents were paying tuition, I was getting decent grades, life was following the script they'd written. Then my dad lost his job. Not his fault, company downsized, he was let go with 2 months severance and a handshake. Suddenly the family finances went from comfortable to precarious. I remember the conversation. Dad sitting at the kitchen table, Mom standing behind him with her hand on his shoulder, both of them looking exhausted. "We need to talk about school," Dad said. "I know you're doing well, and we're proud of you, but with my situation, we need to make some changes." "I can get a job," I said immediately. "Work part-time, cover some expenses." "It's more than that. We can't afford out-of-state tuition anymore. Even in-state is pushing it right now." Mom jumped in. "We're not asking you to quit. Just maybe take a semester off. Let us get back on our feet." But I could see it in their eyes. A semester would become a year. A year would become indefinite. Once you stop, it's hard to start again. Statistics don't lie about that. "What if I transferred?" I asked. "Found something cheaper? Maybe community college while I work?" They looked relieved I'd suggested it first. "That could work. Just temporarily. Until things stabilize." So I withdrew from state. Enrolled at the community college near home. Picked up a full-time night shift at a warehouse, 40 hours a week, 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. Slept during the day, went to classes in the evening, studied whenever I could find time. It wasn't the traditional college experience. No dorm life, no campus activities, no study groups in the library. Just work, class, sleep, repeat. I didn't tell my parents about the night shift at first. Didn't want them to worry, didn't want them to feel guilty. Just said I was working part-time and taking some classes. And that's where the misunderstanding started. Mom saw I wasn't at state anymore. Saw I was working. Assumed I'd dropped out to work full-time. And instead of asking me directly, she just ran with that narrative. I first found out at Thanksgiving. I'd come home from an overnight shift, exhausted, planning to crash for a few hours before classes. I walked in to find Mom's sister, my Aunt Carol, sitting at the kitchen table. "Marcus," she said, getting up to hug me. "Your mother told me you're taking a break from school. That must have been a tough decision." I looked at Mom. She was very focused on stirring her coffee. "I'm not taking a break. I'm still in school. I just transferred to community college." Aunt Carol looked confused. "Oh, but your mother said you decided college wasn't for you right now." "No, I'm literally going to classes. I have one tonight." Mom finally looked up. "Well, community college isn't the same thing as real college, Marcus. It's more like vocational training. It's still college, Mom. I'm working toward my degree." "If you say so, honey." That was my first clue that something was off. But I was too tired to push it. I went to bed, went to class, went back to work. Over the next few months, I started noticing a pattern. Family gatherings, neighborhood run-ins, my parents' friends stopping me at the grocery store. Everyone had the same sympathetic expression, the same carefully worded questions. "So, taking some time off from school? Your mom mentioned you're working now instead of studying. Sometimes the traditional path isn't for everyone." Every time, I'd correct them. "No, I'm still in school. Just at a different school while I work." And every time, they'd look confused, like I was contradicting established fact. I confronted Mom about it after Christmas. "Why is everyone under the impression I dropped out?" "I never said you dropped out." "Then why does everyone think I did?" "I just said you weren't at state anymore. People make their own assumptions. But you're not correcting them." She got defensive. "I'm not going to explain your entire situation to every person who asks. It's complicated. Easier to just say you're taking a different path. A different path sounds like a euphemism for failure. That's not what I meant. But it was what she meant. Or at least, what she was comfortable letting people believe. See, my mom had been telling people since I was in high school that I was going to be a doctor. Had shown everyone my acceptance letters, bragged about my pre-med track, made my college career part of her identity. When I transferred to community college and started working nights, it didn't fit that narrative anymore. So instead of updating the story, she just let it fade. Let people assume I'd given up, that I wasn't serious about my education, that I'd become one of those kids who couldn't hack it. It was easier than explaining that life had gotten complicated. Easier than admitting our family financial situation had changed. Easier than confronting the reality that her son was working 40 hours a week at a warehouse while still pursuing his degree. The thing is, I wasn't ashamed of what I was doing. Working night shift was brutal, yeah, but I was proud of myself. Proud that I'd found a way to stay in school without burdening my parents. Proud that I was building work ethic and life skills alongside my education. But Mom seemed embarrassed by it. Like having a son in community college working the warehouse night shift reflected poorly on her somehow. I tried talking to Dad about it. Does it bother you that I'm not at state anymore? Of course not. I'm proud of you for adapting. Not everyone could handle what you're handling. Can you tell Mom that? Because she keeps telling people I dropped out. He sighed. Your mother has a certain image of how things should go. When reality doesn't match that image, she struggles with it. So I'm supposed to just let her lie about me? It's not lying, exactly. It's more like selective truth-telling. That's literally what lying is, Dad. He didn't have a response to that. So I stopped correcting people. If they thought I'd dropped out, fine. If they thought I'd given up, whatever. I was too exhausted from working and studying to care about my mom's book club's opinion of me. I finished my associate degree in 2 years while working full-time. Then I transferred to the state university that had an evening program for working adults. Kept the night shift job. Kept grinding. Mom never asked about my classes. Never asked how I was managing it all. Just kept telling people I was still figuring things out. When I graduated with my bachelor's degree, she came to the ceremony. Sat in the audience with Dad. Clapped when I walked across the stage. Afterward, her friend Diane congratulated her. You must be so proud. I thought Marcus had given up on school. Mom laughed. Oh no, he took an unconventional path, but he got there eventually. Eventually. Like it had taken me longer than it should have. Like I'd meandered instead of sprinting. I graduated in exactly 4 years from when I'd left state. Same timeline as if I'd never left. But because those 4 years involved work and community college and night school, they didn't count the same way in her mind. After graduation, I got a job as a research assistant at a pharmaceutical company. Entry level, but good benefits, room to grow. I moved into my own apartment, finally had a normal sleep schedule, started feeling like an actual adult. Mom's narrative evolved. Now I was finally getting serious about life. Like the previous 4 years of working full-time while getting my degree didn't count as serious. I dated, made friends, built a life. Mom would occasionally mention me to her friends, but always with this qualifier. Marcus is doing well now. Took him a while to find his path, but he's figuring it out. I stopped correcting her. What was the point? Then I went back to school. Not because I had to, but because I wanted to. Got into a master's program in biochemistry. Evening classes again, because I was still working full-time. This time because I wanted to keep my job and financial stability, not because I had no choice. I didn't tell my parents right away. Didn't want to deal with Mom's commentary about how I was still in school at my age, or whatever spin she'd put on it. But 2 years later, when I finished my master's and the company promoted me to senior researcher, I mentioned it at Sunday dinner. Got some good news. Finished my master's and got promoted. Dad looked genuinely surprised and proud. Master's? When did you start that? 2 years ago. Evening program. Mom's face did this complicated thing where she was happy but also confused but also maybe annoyed. You've been in graduate school for 2 years and didn't tell us? You never asked what I was doing with my evenings. Well, I assumed you were living your life. Dating, hobbies, normal things. I was doing those things too. And getting a master's degree. She processed this. Is this why you couldn't make it to Aunt Carol's retirement party last year? Because you had class? Yes. You said you had work obligations? Class is a work obligation when it's career-related. She got quiet. Dad broke the tension. Congratulations, son. That's a real achievement. Master's degree while working full-time? That's impressive. Thanks, Dad. Mom recovered. Yes, of course. Congratulations. I just wish you told us. We would have celebrated. Would they, though? Or would Mom have found a way to minimize it, to suggest it was taking me too long to finish my education, to compare me to whoever's kid had gone straight through to their PhD? I learned to keep my achievements to myself. When I published my first research paper, I didn't tell them. When I got another promotion, I mentioned it casually in passing. When I was invited to speak at a conference, I didn't even bring it up. It wasn't worth the weird energy Mom brought to everything I did. The way she'd be proud but also somehow disappointed that I hadn't done it her way, on her timeline, following her script. My girlfriend at the time, Jasmine, called it like she saw it. Your mom can't just be happy for you. She has to reframe everything so it fits her narrative. That sounds harsh. Is it wrong? It wasn't wrong. The relationship with Jasmine didn't last, but her observation stuck with me. Made me realize I'd been doing this thing where I dimmed my own light to avoid my mother's complicated relationship with my success. 3 years after finishing my master's, I got recruited to a bigger pharmaceutical company. Better position, better pay, leading my own research team. At 28, I was doing well by any objective measure. Mom's book club met at our house one Thursday. I'd stopped by to drop off Dad's blood pressure medication he'd left at the pharmacy. Walked into a living room full of women in their 50s and 60s, wine glasses in hand, talking about some bestseller. "Oh, Marcus," Mom said, slightly flustered. "Ladies, this is my son." A chorus of hellos. One woman, Janet, said, "Oh, you're the one who took a break from college, right? How's that going?" I stared at Mom. She wouldn't meet my eyes. "I didn't take a break. I finished my bachelor's 6 years ago and my master's 3 years ago. I'm a senior research scientist at Morrison Pharmaceuticals." The room got quiet. Janet looked confused. "Oh. I mean, Linda said you decided college wasn't for you." "Linda said wrong?" Mom laughed nervously. "I never said that exactly. People misunderstood. People misunderstood because you let them. For 6 years. I left before it could get worse. But driving home, I was furious. 6 years. She'd been telling people for 6 years that I'd given up on school. Let them think I was working some dead-end job, barely getting by, one of those kids who couldn't handle higher education. And I'd let her. Because correcting her was exhausting. Because every time I tried to set the record straight, she'd twist it somehow, make it seem like I was being defensive or exaggerating. That night I called Dad. "Did you know Mom's been telling people I'm a dropout?" He sighed. "I know she hasn't been entirely accurate about your situation." "Entirely accurate?" "Dad, she's been lying. She sees it differently. In her mind, leaving state was giving up, and everything after that was just you trying to recover from that decision. But I didn't give up. I adapted. I found a way to finish school while supporting myself. I know that. You know that. Your mother has a harder time seeing it that way." "Why?" "Because admitting you did it on your own means admitting we couldn't help you. And that's hard for her." That stopped me. I hadn't thought about it like that. So she'd rather people think I failed than admit she couldn't pay for my education? I don't think she's thought it through that clearly. I think she just got uncomfortable with the questions and gave answers that were easier for her to live with. That's really messed up, Dad. I know. We hung up. I sat in my apartment, looking at my degrees framed on the wall, my research publications, and the photos from the conference where I'd been a keynote speaker. All the proof that I'd succeeded despite the obstacles, not failed because of them. And my mother had spent 6 years telling people the opposite. I didn't talk to Mom for a month after that. Ignored her calls, kept my responses to her texts short and factual. Dad would call occasionally to check in, never pushing, just letting me know he understood why I was upset. Then something happened that changed everything. The alumni magazine from State University, the school I'd left after my sophomore year, reached out. They were doing a feature on alumni who'd taken non-traditional paths to success and wanted to interview me. Apparently, my research had caught someone's attention. A paper I'd published on protein synthesis inhibitors had been cited in several major studies. Someone at State had tracked down that I'd briefly attended and thought my story would be interesting. We're highlighting alumni who've made significant contributions to their fields, the editor told me over the phone. Your journey from leaving State to where you are now is exactly the kind of story we want to tell. I'm not sure my family would appreciate that story being public, I said. Why not? It's a great story. Financial hardship, working full-time, putting yourself through community college and evening programs, and ending up as a lead researcher making actual breakthroughs. That's inspirational. When she put it like that, it did sound good. Not like the failure narrative Mom had been telling, but like something to be proud of. Okay, I said. Let's do it. The interview was thorough. They asked about why I'd left State, about the warehouse job, about juggling work and school, about the research I was doing now. They took professional photos of me in the lab, sent a photographer to my apartment to get some casual shots. This is going to be our cover story for the spring issue, the editor told me. We're really excited about it. I didn't tell my parents. Didn't tell anyone really except my girlfriend Emma, who I'd been dating for about a year. Your mom's going to lose her mind, Emma said when I showed her the draft article. Good. Maybe she'll finally stop telling people I dropped out. Or she'll find a way to make this about her somehow. Emma knew my family dynamics well. We'd had plenty of conversations about Mom's complicated relationship with my success. The magazine came out in March. Glossy cover, my photo in my lab coat, headline reading, From Night Shift to Breakthrough, How Marcus Chin Built a Research Career on His Own Terms. The article was 4 pages. Detailed my entire journey, quoted me extensively about the challenges of working full-time while in school, highlighted my research accomplishments, and ended with a quote from my department head calling me one of the most dedicated and innovative researchers he'd worked with. It was everything Mom's narrative wasn't. Not a story about giving up or taking the easy route or being a disappointment. A story about persistence and self-sufficiency and success earned through hard work. I got my copy in the mail on a Tuesday. Read it 3 times, still couldn't quite believe it was about me. Posted a photo of the cover on Instagram with a simple caption. Honored to be featured. The comments flooded in. Colleagues, friends, and former professors. Everyone congratulating me, saying they'd had no idea about my journey, calling it inspiring. And then, Thursday afternoon, I got a call from Dad. Your mother's book club met today. Okay? Janet brought your magazine. The State University Alumni Magazine. With you on the cover. I sat down. Oh. She apparently subscribes because her daughter went there. Brought it to show everyone, said wasn't it amazing that Linda's son who dropped out was actually this successful researcher? What did Mom say? Not much at first. Just got very quiet. Then when everyone started asking her about it, asking why she'd never mentioned you were a lead researcher or that you'd published papers or spoken at conferences, she said she didn't like to brag. She didn't like to brag? Dad, she's been telling people I'm a dropout for 6 years. I know. She's been actively minimizing everything I've accomplished because it didn't happen the way she wanted it to happen. I know that too. So what happens now? He was quiet for a moment. I think you need to come over for dinner. We need to have a conversation, all 3 of us. I didn't want to. Wanted to let her sit with the embarrassment of being exposed as a liar in front of her friends. Wanted her to feel even a fraction of what I'd felt every time she dismissed my achievements. But I also knew avoiding it wouldn't solve anything. I went over on Sunday. Mom was in the kitchen when I arrived, cooking in that aggressive way she did when she was upset. Chopping vegetables like they'd personally offended her. Hi, Mom. Marcus. She didn't look up. Your father's in the living room. I found Dad reading the newspaper. He put it down when he saw me. Want something to drink before we do this? Is it going to be that bad? It's going to be honest. That's often worse. We sat down at the dinner table. Mom served the food silently. We ate in uncomfortable quiet for a few minutes before Dad finally said, Linda, you want to start or should I? Mom set down her fork. I saw your magazine article. I figured. You could have told me about it. I could have told you about a lot of things. My master's degree. My promotions. My published research. My speaking engagements. But I stopped telling you things because you had a way of making them feel less significant than they were. That's not fair. Isn't it? You've been telling people I dropped out of college for 6 years. You've let everyone believe I failed, that I couldn't handle higher education, that I gave up. And the whole time, I was working harder than I'd ever worked in my life to finish my degree and build a career. I never said you dropped out. You let people believe it. Which is the same thing. Mom's face was doing that thing where she was trying to hold on to her position, but knew she was wrong. People made assumptions. Because you didn't correct them. Because it was easier to let them think I'd failed than to explain that our family had financial problems, and I'd found a way to handle it myself. That landed. She flinched. That's what this is really about, isn't it? I continued. You were embarrassed that we couldn't afford to keep me at state. Embarrassed that your son had to work night shift at a warehouse. Embarrassed that I went to community college instead of the prestigious university you'd been bragging about. So instead of being proud of me for adapting, you just let everyone think I'd given up. I was proud of you, she said quietly. Then why didn't you ever say it? Why didn't you correct people when they felt sorry for me? Why didn't you tell your book club that I'd graduated with honors or that I'd gotten into a competitive grad program or that I was leading research projects? She didn't answer. Just sat there with tears starting to form. Dad spoke up. Linda, he's right. You've been carrying shame about our financial situation and projecting it onto Marcus's story. But his story isn't shameful. It's the opposite. I know that, Mom said. I do know that. When people would ask about you, I didn't know what to say. It felt complicated. And the more time that passed, the harder it was to correct the misunderstanding. So you let it become my identity. I said. The son who couldn't hack it at college. The disappointment. The one who took the easy route. You didn't take the easy route. What you did was harder. I know it was harder, Mom. I lived it. Every day for 6 years, I worked and studied and pushed myself. And you minimized all of it because it didn't look the way you wanted it to look. She was crying now. I'm sorry. I didn't realize how much it was hurting you. How could you not realize? Every time I corrected someone, every time I tried to explain what I was actually doing, you'd wave it off or change the subject. I thought you didn't care what people thought. I didn't care what strangers thought. I cared what you thought. I cared that my own mother couldn't acknowledge my accomplishments. The table went silent except for Mom's quiet crying. Dad reached over and put his hand on her shoulder. Finally, she looked at me. I'm proud of you, Marcus. I should have said it more. Should have said it at all. You did something remarkable, and instead of celebrating it, I hid it. I'm sorry. It wasn't enough. It couldn't be enough to make up for 6 years. But it was something. What happens now? I asked. Now I tell people the truth, she said. About all of it. About what you accomplished. About how wrong I was. And if they ask why you never told them before, I'll tell them I made a mistake. That I was more concerned with appearances than with supporting my son. We sat there, food getting cold, the weight of 6 years of misunderstanding heavy in the air. I'm not going to forget this overnight, I said. It's going to take time. I understand. And I need you to actually see me. Not the version of me you wish I was, but the actual person I am. The researcher, the scientist, the person who works hard and succeeds even when it doesn't follow your script. I will. I promise I will. Whether she'd follow through remained to be seen. But for the first time in 6 years, I felt like maybe she was actually hearing me. The change wasn't immediate. Mom didn't wake up the next day and suddenly become a different person. But slowly, things started shifting. She called me a week later. I talked to Janet. Told her I'd been wrong about how I described your situation. That you didn't drop out, that you actually worked incredibly hard to finish your education while supporting yourself. How'd she take it? She was surprised. Asked why I'd let everyone believe otherwise. I told her I was embarrassed about our financial situation and took it out on your story. That must have been hard to admit. It was. But it needed to be said. Over the next few months, I'd occasionally hear through Dad that Mom had corrected someone else. A neighbor, a cousin, her hairdresser. Slowly dismantling the narrative she'd built. She started asking about my work too. Actually asking, not just making polite conversation. What research I was doing, what the significance was, and whether I enjoyed it. Like she was getting to know her son for the first time. Tell me about your protein synthesis paper, she said one Sunday. The one that got cited a lot. I explained it as simply as I could. She listened, really listened, and asked follow-up questions that showed she was trying to understand. I'm sorry I never asked before, she said when I finished. I should have been curious about your work. Should have wanted to know what you were accomplishing. Why weren't you? She thought about it. I think part of me was stuck on the story I'd imagined for you. Pre-med at state medical school, becoming a doctor. When that didn't happen the way I'd pictured, I couldn't adjust. Couldn't see that you'd found a different path that was just as valuable. More valuable to me, I said. I don't think I would have been happy as a doctor. Are you happy now? I thought about my lab, my team, the research that actually excited me. Yeah. I really am. She smiled, and it looked genuine. Then I'm happy too. Finally. The alumni magazine article kept circulating. People I'd lost touch with reached out. Old professors, former classmates, colleagues from other companies. The response was overwhelming and humbling. My company used it in recruiting materials. This is the kind of innovative thinking we value, my boss said. Non-traditional paths, people who've proven they can handle adversity. I got invited to speak at State's graduation ceremony the following year. Asked to share my story with students who might be facing their own obstacles. Standing on that stage, looking at hundreds of graduates and their families, I talked about leaving State, about the warehouse job, about night school and community college. About the long, hard path that nobody sees when they just look at where you ended up. Success doesn't always look like you think it will, I told them. Sometimes it looks like working overnight and sleeping through alarms and wondering if you can keep going. But if you can see the value in your own journey, even when others don't, that's what matters. Mom and Dad were in the audience. Emma was there too. Afterward, Mom hugged me hard. I'm so proud of you, she said. And I'm sorry it took me so long to say it properly. I know, Mom. No, I need you to really hear this. What you did, working full-time and finishing your degree and building this career, that's extraordinary. And I should have been shouting it from the rooftops instead of hiding it. You're telling people now. That's what matters. She pulled back, looked at me. Can I make a request? What? Next time you accomplish something, big or small, will you tell me? Even if you think I won't understand or won't react the right way. Just give me the chance to try. Okay, I said. I can do that. 3 months later, I got engaged to Emma. We'd been dating for 2 years, living together for 1, and it felt like the right time. I told my parents over dinner. Mom's face lit up with genuine excitement, and then she did something unexpected. She pulled out her phone and took a picture of Emma and me. I'm putting this in the family album, she said. And I'm posting it on Facebook. Because this is something worth celebrating. She typed out a caption while we watched. Thrilled to announce my son Marcus, lead researcher and published scientist, is engaged to the wonderful Emma. So proud of the life he's built, and the person he's become. No qualifiers. No eventually, or finally, or despite taking a different path. Just straightforward pride. She hit post, then showed me. Is this okay? It's perfect, Mom. The comments came fast. Friends congratulating us, relatives expressing surprise at my job title, people saying they hadn't known about my career. A few of Mom's book club friends commenting with variations of, "We had no idea Marcus was so accomplished." Mom responded to each one, not making excuses, just acknowledging. "I didn't talk about it as much as I should have. Marcus has done amazing things and I'm making up for lost time in celebrating him." Emma squeezed my hand under the table. She'd been worried about this dinner, worried Mom would find some way to minimize the engagement, or make it complicated. "Your mom's really trying," she whispered. "Yeah. She really is." Later that week, I stopped by my parents' house to drop off some paperwork Dad needed. Found Mom in the living room, going through old photo albums. "What are you doing?" "Making a new album. For you. All the things I should have been documenting but wasn't." She showed me what she'd been working on. Printouts of articles about my research, copy of my master's degree, programs from conferences where I'd spoken. The alumni magazine cover. "I can't go back and take pictures of you at graduation or your first day of work," she said. "But I can make sure going forward, I'm documenting the life you're actually living." I sat next to her. "You don't have to do this." "Yes, I do. For 6 years, I erased your story. Time to start telling it correctly." We worked on the album together. She asked questions about each accomplishment, took notes, wanted to understand the timeline. It was healing in a way I hadn't expected. "Can I ask you something?" she said after a while. "Sure." "When you were working night shift and going to school, were there times you wanted to quit?" "Constantly. Especially that first year. I was exhausted all the time, felt like I was failing at everything." "Why didn't you tell us?" "Tell me?" "Because you'd already decided I'd given up." "What was the point in telling you I was struggling when you thought I wasn't even trying?" She was quiet. "I'm sorry I wasn't there for you when things were hard. I should have asked. Should have checked in. You're asking now. That counts for something." The album became something we worked on together over the next few months. She'd call me with questions, send me photos she'd found, ask for clarification on papers I'd published. It was like she was making up for 6 years of not paying attention by being intensely interested in every detail now. When it was finished, she brought it to a family dinner. Passed it around to relatives who'd spent years thinking I was a dropout. "I need to make something clear," she announced to everyone. "For years I let people believe Marcus had dropped out of college. That he'd given up on education. That was wrong, and I was wrong to allow it. The truth is, he worked harder than anyone I know to finish his degree while supporting himself. He has a master's degree. He's published research papers. He's a lead scientist doing work that matters. And I'm sorry I never told any of you that before." The room was silent. Then my Aunt Carol, the one who'd first asked me about taking a break from school all those years ago, started clapping. Others joined in. "I'm proud of my son," Mom continued. "Not for eventually getting his act together or finally figuring things out, but for being exactly who he's always been, hardworking, dedicated, and brilliant. Even when I couldn't see it." I wasn't expecting to get emotional, but I did. Because this was what I'd needed 6 years ago. Not just acknowledgement, but pride. Not just acceptance, but celebration. After dinner, as people were leaving, Janet from book club pulled me aside. "Your mother talks about you very differently now." "Yeah?" "She used to change the subject when anyone asked about you. Now she brings you up voluntarily. Tells everyone about your research. It's nice to see. It's nice to experience," I said honestly. "Emma and I got married 6 months later. At the reception, Mom gave a speech. When Marcus was in college," she began, and I braced myself. "He faced obstacles that would have made most people quit. Financial hardship, working full-time overnight, juggling classes and exhaustion, and impossible odds. And he didn't just survive it. He excelled. He graduated with honors. He got his master's while working full-time. He became a researcher doing work that saves lives." She looked at me. For a long time, I didn't see that. Didn't acknowledge it. I was so caught up in the path I'd imagined for him that I couldn't appreciate the path he actually took. But his path was better. More real. More earned. She raised her glass. To Marcus, who succeeded despite the obstacles, including me. And to Emma, who sees him for exactly who he is. Which is extraordinary. The room applauded. Emma was crying happy tears. Dad was beaming. And I realized that the story had finally been corrected. Not just in what people believed, but in what they celebrated. 6 years of being invisible, erased, diminished. But sometimes the truth just takes time to catch up.